Black Lives Matter is protesting vaccination mandates because they say it is being weaponized to allow segregation. And you know what? They are correct. Now, this all stems from a story out of New York City you may have heard of. Carmine's, a restaurant where several women were seen fighting with a hostess. Apparently, they were accused of having fake vaccine cards. They fought, ultimately got arrested. What I find fascinating, though, is that the police did not charge these women with forgery of fake vaccine cards. They were tourists from Texas, but the story is a little bit more complicated than first laid out. You see, it would appear that initially these women arrived, there's 3 black women, to the restaurant and were allowed to enter. They were seated. But 3 men came to join, and 2 of them did not have proof of vaccination. When the women came out, they were then accused of having fake vaccine cards, and a fight breaks out. According to security footage, it's reported, the tourists, the black women, swung at the Asian hostess first. A fight broke out, and the cops came and arrested these individuals. These women accused the hostess of using derogatory comments and saying the N-word. Now, I'll say this. It's a he said, she said in this regard. I don't know if this woman actually said that. I kind of would be surprised if that was the case. And it may be that these women are exaggerating and trying to play up racism to win a feud. I do find it fascinating, however, they were accused of having fake vaccine cards, regardless of the other 2 men, but were not charged with it. And that's why I am saying to you right now, first, there's several points to be made, why I do think that the vaccine mandate is being weaponized and will be weaponized by racists. The first thing, let me say, New York City is racist. Democrats are racist. Not every single Democrat, but many of them, especially the politically initiated ones. Critical race theory is an overtly racist ideology that advocates for race-based policies. That is wrong, and I think these people are racist. The Democratic Party has always been racist in some fashion. They claim the party switched, but to me, it looks the exact same. Still the party opposing civil rights, sure. The Democrats in New York City like to talk about systemic racism and institutional racism, and I think people who don't live there need to realize that New York is a particularly racist place. They do have institutional and systemic racism. It does exist. And the crazy thing to me is that they're conservatives who are like arguing to me that the Democrat stronghold of the United States is not racist. And I'm like, let's just stop and pause for 1 second. And I'll ask you this question. Do you think Democrats are racist? Overwhelming majority of Republicans would say yes. I would agree. Why? Critical race theory. I lived in Chicago. I've experienced their policies firsthand. Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, talked about how he would racially profile people because of crime rates. So, yeah, stop and frisk, for instance. Why would it be surprising to any conservative to hear that the Democrat stronghold has racism problems? Now, that being said, there are laws in place to prevent discrimination. What do we get now? There was a viral video. I don't know the full context, and I'm not saying these people are absolutely correct. Context matters. But there was a video where a man goes to a restaurant and he's a black man and with his family. He's asked for proof of vaccination and he says he's religiously exempt. This man in a blue shirt then says, well, you have to leave then. The man filming says, no, I don't. I'm religiously exempt. They argue. Eventually, the black man starts yelling to people, is this the America you want? This is segregation. And people are cheering for it. The black man then points out to the guy who's asking for proof of vaccination, you didn't ask any of these other people, just them when they walked in. Now, in this particular instance, I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know if this guy was just like barging his way in and they were like, stop, we need proof of vaccination. And maybe the guy running the store really did ask everyone. But let's talk about something for a second. I think it's likely people of New York being Democrat voters that many of them are racist. I think the policies, the mayors, the politician, all of it has had a lot of racism problems. I mean, it is a Democrat stronghold. Not every Democrat's a racist, mind you, but there are a lot of them. They say the same thing of Republicans. There are a lot of Republicans that are racist. I'm not denying that. I agree. Not every single one, but enough in New York City, I think, to be fair. Michael Bloomberg racially profiled people. And now we have the systemic racism, as it were, of vaccination status. White people are substantially more likely to be vaccinated. Black people are not. So what do you get? Restaurants probably know this. Not every single one, but enough. They hear on the news, white people in New York City are 80% vaccinated. Black people are only 35% vaccinated. And so what do? Well, it's very difficult to check vaccine status of every single patron of your business, especially if your capacity is 100, 200. It can be tough, right? So I can only imagine that there is a potential for this at the very least, where a white family walks in and there's a guy behind the counter and he's like, handling the till and taking orders or whatever. And he sees the white family and says, well, the news says they're most likely vaccinated, so I'm not going to waste my time. And then he sees a black family come in and he says, well, the news says they're probably not vaccinated. I better check them. Racial profiling based on media. I'm not saying that is what happened. I'm just saying it's possible. And I got to be honest. I think it has happened already. We just haven't heard about it. In this instance with Carmeens, these women were accused of having fake vaccine cards. The police didn't charge them with this. So who is this hostess to try and use that against them? I don't know. Maybe racists? Okay, maybe it's bold to say. Maybe we hear there's too many, we hear the claims of racism too much and most people aren't racist. Okay, let me just explain. A regular business in New York would have a really difficult time discriminating on the basis of race. Because somebody would show up and they'd say something like, oh, this person happens to have this identity or this national origin or this religion. We reserve the right to refuse service to anybody, so get out. And that person can say I was given no reason and it was clearly because of my religion or my preference or whatever, right? And then you could maybe sue and have that challenged. With the vaccine mandate, it's so much easier. You can have a hostess or a vaccine passport checker for your bar. And they can simply say, here comes one of those people. I'm sorry, I can't verify this card. You can't come in. And then what do they say? That person files a suit saying they were just discriminating against me because of my race. And they say, no, the vaccine card they gave us was questionable and we didn't want to get fined. We were told we had to check. And if you didn't have it, we said, I'm sorry, I can't accept this. And there it is. Now they have an excuse so that if anybody comes to their place of business, they can deny them and just fall back on, we were forced to check their ID and it didn't seem real. Now you may be saying, when it comes to bars, they require ID. Yes, bars often kick people out citing their ID didn't look real. And they can use that to discriminate. One of these guys? Sorry, I don't think this ID is real. There's a challenge, however. If someone is over the age of 21, and there's a guy who's got bags under his eyes, liver spots, and a huge beard, you can't be like, this guy's clearly 19. But the vaccine card's something special. Because now anyone can show up and you can say, I can't verify this one and I'm not going to get in trouble. And thus the bouncers can then start removing anybody with little recourse. These people would have to do anything about it. So you know what? It's one of those rare instances. I agree with Black Lives Matter. The vaccine passports are wrong, and they open the door to overt and extreme discrimination and racism against everybody. Businesses should not be, in my opinion, should not be able to discriminate on the basis of race, national origin, identity, etc. If you are in the commons and utilizing public spaces, you must accommodate the public. Now, you got a business in New York, you can say, and in fact, you can do this anywhere now. Just because the state, your state doesn't have a mandate, any business could do it. Let's see, you didn't have proof of vaccination. You can't come in. Now, truth be told, if it was in a state without a mandate, you would have to treat everyone equally. So you'd only be able to allowed to let people in who have the card. But think about the discretion you have in a place like New York or LA or New Orleans or San Francisco, where, and there was another state that was doing it. LA just did it. You can just say, okay, your vaccine card's good. Your vaccine card's bad. And nothing can be done about it. Now, I don't like Black Lives Matter going around rioting and smashing things up. I don't like their tacit support of Antifa. But on principle, if they come out and say that vaccine mandates are being weaponized and they're bad, I'm like, I see it. Here's a story from the National Review. This is interesting stuff. After a skirmish involving New York City's vaccine mandate and African-American patrons erupted at Carmeens restaurant in the Upper West Side last week, Black Lives Matter of Greater New York and related organizations converged in front of the establishment Monday to protest and hold a news conference. The original police report detailed that 3 black women from Texas got into an altercation with a 24-year-old hostess on Thursday after she asked them to provide proof of vaccination to eat indoors. However, subsequent information from the attorneys for both Carmeens and the women revealed the trio did in fact present verification of vaccination to enter. Shortly after the women's group was seated, 3 men arrived to join the party inside, but 2 were denied entry because they failed to provide vaccination documentation. Lawyers from both sides confirmed to the New York Times. A fight broke out outside when a hostess allegedly used a racial slur. I'm not sure I believe that, and this had made derogatory remarks directed at the female customers, accusing them of carrying fraudulent vaccination cards. The lawyer who represents one of the women, Keita Nikinge Rankin, who is a doctor, told The Times. Justin Moore, the lawyer, said the women claimed the hostess spewed out the N-word after the brawl. NYPD arrested the 3 black women for investigation of criminal mischief and assault, but not for forgery of documentation. And so if this hostess has the ability to accuse them of that and deny them entrance, can't you see where the problem is? They say organized by Black Lives Matter Greater New York. Demonstrators congregated Monday to clarify the story from their perspective. At the rally, the speakers railed against the racial obscenity that was allegedly uttered, as well as the perceived discrimination against the black unvaccinated patrons. While protesters claimed the hostess was white, invoking white supremacy multiple times, Carmine's owner, Jeffrey Banks, told the New York Post the employees who he says were violently attacked were black, Latina, Asian American. No, I'm not playing this game. Nah, I think Carmine's is racist. I really, really do. I think these progressives racially profile people based off the information they got from the news about black people being less likely to be vaccinated. And now they're going to profile and they're going to double down. Why? Because they don't want to be accused of racism. But I've seen it in New York and I believe it. There are certainly a lot of people who are not racist, but there are many people who are. And I'm not going to sit back while these businesses who are willing to lick the feet of Bill de Blasio open up the door to overt segregation and the destruction of the Civil Rights Act. Now, Carmines can come out and say, we're not racist. We're not. We swear. And I'll be like, you are enacting an illegal policy discriminating against people based on religious or medical reasons. You don't care. Now, apparently, racial reasons. If a business is willing to say, I will violate the ADA and the 1964 Civil Rights Act, then, or I guess technically the Civil Rights Act, but the First Amendment, then perhaps it's important to point out, why would they not also be inclined to discriminate on the basis of race? Okay? They're violating the Americans with Disability Act because of people's right to, if you're medically exempt, you should be able to go to a business. And that's, you know, some people, like, you got to build buildings with wheelchairs. If your doctor says you can't get it for some reason, you shouldn't be barred a public accommodation. Then there's religion. It's a First Amendment issue. If your religion says you cannot do it, then you can't do it. I mean, religion is people's lives, their world, it's their eternity. That's a scary thought to take that away. And so you mean to tell me that these businesses are gleefully, with a smile on their face, saying, we will violate city law, state law, and federal law to enforce a decree from the mayor, but they're not going to do it for racist reasons. So the simple question here, do you think Democrats are racist? Most conservatives will say yes, Democrats would say no. So do you think, okay, how about this? Do you think some Democrats in New York are racist? Okay, now more people are going to say yes. I'll make it even easier for all of you. Do you think there are crazy people in New York who are not Democrats who are racist and run businesses? The answer? Well, of course. Do you think it makes sense then to put in place a policy where the crazy racists can get jobs and start barring people based on race? That is going to create problems. We shouldn't allow it. They want to say BLM NYC co-founder Hank Newsom alleged the restaurant staff treated the black women with hostility and accused Carmines of covering up their employees' actions by using the vaccination passport as an excuse. He demanded that Carmines release its video footage of the incident, which he believes will settle that the hostess was the antagonizer and the three women were wrongfully charged. Well, it shows the tourists, the women, throwing the first punches. So I will say this. Black Lives Matter is not being completely forthcoming, and they're not completely correct when it comes to what's going on. The surveillance footage shows that. But they are right in principle that the vaccine mandate probably already has been used by racists in New York City to bar certain people from their establishment on the grounds of, we do not believe your vaccine card is real. Take into consideration the idea of systemic racism, and New York City is systemically racist. Here's what's interesting. There's a video from Mythicist Milwaukee. You may have seen those guys. We did an event with them a couple years ago. And they ask Ibram X. Kendi, the anti-racist. He says that any law or policy that disproportionately impacts someone of a particular race is institutionally racist. You may have heard this from us over and over again. Then where is Ibram Kendi to come out and say, okay, then vaccine mandates are racist because black people are less likely to be vaccinated? He didn't. And when challenged on it, he didn't give a real answer because he's a grifter. He has no principles. He can't even just say, yeah, maybe not in all cases. Maybe I was wrong to be so general in that regard. I think a lot of policies that would, I think it's fair to say, you can find policies that disproportionately affect people of different races and say it's systemically racist. In this regard, though, maybe it's a bit different because of a national emergency and people's choice. He could have said something like that. Instead, well, he can't. He is wishy-washy. I think it just goes to show the reality is grifters, lies, and manipulation. But Hank Newsom seems to be a good dude, though. I've seen this guy. He's Black Lives Matter all the way. All right. He believes in this stuff. I'm not a big fan of Black Lives Matter as an organization, but he also was willing to do interviews and talk with people on the right. And it was Hank Newsom. I'm pretty sure it was Hank who showed up at the mother of all rallies, this Trump rally. And he went up on stage and he celebrated with Trump supporters and they were hugging and they were in agreement. You see, because I see Hank as a good faith guy. You can accuse him of a lot of stuff. And I'm like, I think he's trying. I think he really is. But, when I talk to Ian, for instance, if you watch the Timcast THEYRE podcast, Ian believes that's how everyone is. And it's not true. When writers from these mainstream leftist publications willingly and overtly lie about you and me and other people, we know they're doing it on purpose because they're bad people. Hank's not lying to people. He might be wrong, but it seems like he's genuinely trying to do the right thing. See, that's rare. And the truth is there are people on the right who go on YouTube and lie as well. The difference? The left has institutional power. The right does not. That needs to be taken into consideration. They go on to say, Shivona Newsom, the other co-founder of BLM NYC, targeted Bill de Blasio's vaccine mandate more specifically in her remarks. She implied that the edict has resulted in repeats of historical episodes when blacks were disenfranchised from society. Being a doctor does not protect you from anti-blackness. Having a vaccination card does not protect you from discrimination. The 1964 Civil Rights Act prohibits the actions of carmines. It says it is illegal to discriminate against you on the basis of race. 72% of black people in the city from ages 18 to 44 are unvaccinated. So what is going to stop the Gestapo, the NYPD, from rounding up black people, from snatching them off the train, off the bus, she added. Okay, well, hold on. That's not happening right now. But I agree with this woman. I think she's absolutely right. How far away are we from being Australia? But Tim, they're not rounding people up to bring them to camps. No, they're just taking from the airports to the camps. And they have taken people from their homes to put them in indefinite quarantine at hotels. And now they say these camps are so that we don't have to use the hotels. So how much longer till we see it? I watched a video today. I don't know how old it is. Of a woman wearing she has poster board over her neck protesting. They arrest her in Australia. When Shivona Newsom comes out and says, what's going to stop the Gestapo from rounding up black people, snatching them off the train, off the bus? I agree. What is going to stop them? When people sit back and let cops do this, what's going to stop them? Now, I've heard NYPD isn't enforcing this stuff. They're refusing to. Okay. So it's just these businesses like Carmines to enforce. If the cops aren't enforcing it, I got no beef in this regard with any police officer. Well, and this is what I've said before. When Antifa was destroying small businesses, I blamed Antifa and said they were bad. When the police went around locking people down, the police were the bad guys. And I warned the conservatives, if the police are going to turn into the Gestapo, you better call for abolition of them immediately, especially considering what the governments are doing with vaccine mandates. If cops are willing to enforce unconstitutional edict, then they should not be granted power. That's criminal. To violate the law of this land is to violate your oath. I think it's fascinating that I'm sitting here agreeing with Black Lives Matter. I believe if we stay on this path, considering 72% of black people are not 18 to 44 unvaccinated, then what happens one day when the police start saying, oh, we got to get rid of the unclean? Yeah, we can't have that. We are putting this city on notice that your mandate will not be another racist social distance practice. Black people are not going to stand by, or you will see another uprising. And that is not a threat. That is a promise. The vaccination passport is not a free passport to racism. Completely agree. Now, I think across the board, the vaccine mandate is bad because it allows discrimination in every capacity. And it's forcing people to undergo a medical procedure by state edict, which is insane. But in this capacity, I do believe it will be used by racists who live in New York, who vote Democrat, to bar people based on race. And it's wrong in general. In this capacity, I agree with the Black Lives Matter protest 100%. What I mean by that is, I think there's things they're missing. But if the crux of their statement is, You will use this to discriminate. I agree they will. Not every single person, but enough. The state should not be mandating this. And it will lead, if we stay on this path, to the rounding up of black people. I will say I'd go further. I think it'll lead to the rounding up of more than just black people. And it'll disproportionately affect everybody. But when I say 100% I agree with them, I mean, in the points she made, I think we will see that. I think Bill de Blasio is an overt racist. I really do. I understand, he's got a black wife. And people are like, that's not an excuse. I think these people are nuts, these critical race theorists. I think Black Lives Matter themselves hold racist ideology, 100%. That's why I say I do not agree with them, nor do I like their movement. But on principle, when I look at what they're saying now, I'm like, yes. So if they're going to stand up and say no to the vaccine mandates, and they're going to say it's because we're worried about racism, I would say, I think they're right about the racism part. I think Bill de Blasio, I think the progressives and the Democrats in New York City are overtly racist. I think they have instituted racist policies in the past. Michael Bloomberg has said they do racial profiling. And you know what? I agree with them. I'd take it one step further. The mandates should be gone for a variety of reasons, and not just the race ones. But I understand why Black Lives Matter is concerned specifically about race. So I say this to you, liberals, conservatives, moderates, independents, wherever you might find yourself. Is it not true that there are many racists in the Democratic Party? People on the right will instantly say yes. People on the left will say no. But people on the left will say New York City has racism problems, and people on the right will push back and say systemic racism doesn't exist. Is it not possible, Democrats, that the people in power in New York City are legitimately racist, and that's why they have racist policies in place decades after the Civil Rights Act? And conservatives, isn't it possible that the Democrats who live in New York City who are racist implement racist policies? I mean, you think they're racist, right? It's really that simple. These people are sitting around them, surrounded by racists, complaining about racism. When we talked about this with male feminists back in the day during the Gamergate stuff. If there is a feminist, a woman, surrounded by male feminists, and male feminists tend to be abusers, as we've seen, then she's going to assume, she's like, every guy I know does this. Lady, you're just hanging out with abusers. Black Lives Matter. Progressives, you're just in racist cities. So I move out to the middle of nowhere, and what I find, people are not racist out here. They'll say crude, crass things. They'll make off-color comments, but they treat everyone with respect, regardless of what their ideas or opinions are. That, to me, is important. I think that's what matters. But I'll leave it there. Keep this stuff in mind. Maybe there's some unity we can have with Black Lives Matter to strike this stuff down. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.